Throughout my life, I've been asked the question, what do you want to do when you grow up, so many times. It can sound like, what are your plans for after high school? What's your dream job? What do you want your career to be? But every time I've been asked that question, I've been so overwhelmed by how many options there were out there. I was always worried that I would pick the wrong one, that I wouldn't be passionate about what I had to do for the rest of my life. But recently, I figured out that maybe that huge variety of choice is a gift and not a disadvantage. So today I'm going to talk about a job that doesn't technically exist. That's called environmental engineering. So in the article, Un ingénieur en environnement, ça fait quoi? Alexis Vaid goes into what it means to be an environmental engineer, even though that particular branch of engineering isn't in L'Ordre des ingénieurs du Québec, which is like the big organization that every official engineer has to sign in through once they're done their schooling. The article also talks about the salary that can be expected, the necessary education, and mostly what can be expected from an environmental engineer. So since there's no official job description, it's quite vague, but it's mostly about just making sure that big construction projects and infrastructure are built in the most environmentally conscious way. So they'll make sure that the ecosystems stay unbothered, that there's as little toxic waste as possible, that the energy is clean, the waters are clean, and all of that. And since you can't study that specific field, you'll probably have to go through um, kind of surrounding areas like agriculture, electricity, water, and forests. Now, for who benefits from the article, I think anyone that is obviously looking to get into environmental engineering and finds that there's not a lot of resources available online and not a lot of information can go to this article because it's very concise, very clear, and it gives like all the necessary information if you're trying to get into that field. And as I said, there's not a lot of information available online about this specific field of study, but they do talk about which specializations in engineering are kind of cousins to it, and so which ones you would have to go through in terms of schooling. So I think looking at curriculums and what different universities offer in terms of those programs. And then they also list which kinds of organizations and people would hire environmental engineers. So maybe contacting them to see what the hiring conditions are like and what kind of specialization and expertise someone would need to get hired in those positions. And finally, why should people know about this? Well, since it's not an official branch of engineering, it's not advertised as much. So I think having that article out there that really plainly states that it is a very clear possibility for a lot of people if they are interested is super helpful, and it can help blend different passions into a career that you're passionate about in the future. Now moving on to the second article, which is Le Génie Conseil au service du développement durable by Mouzima, in which she highlights the relatively recent big infrastructure projects that happened in Montreal that used a lot of environmental engineering. And she gives more concrete examples to how that area of expertise can be utilized in the day to day. She gives four very big examples. So there's Verdun Beach and giving internet to more remote regions of La Baie James. She also talks about the recent renovations and construction of the new pavilion of l'UDM and the National Assembly and how they used green energy and like conscious choices in terms of lighting and how they were going to heat the buildings, how they were going to make the beach without disturbing the ecosystems, without contaminating the soil, and all these examples of how people that are specialized in environmental engineering can come in handy during those big projects. So when will this benefit society? Well, I think that anytime you talk about environmental impacts and trying to be more environmentally conscious, it benefits society as a whole. But it's more of a delayed gratification thing, so trying to minimize your damage in the long run and maybe give us more time to find more impactful solutions. Why should people know about this? I just think sometimes it can be quite hopeless. just seeing all those like disasters happening everywhere and just really sad news all the time. But sometimes it's nice that positive changes are highlighted and knowing that there's people out there that are working towards making a positive difference and doing their best to minimize their environmental footprint is very nice. And finally, who benefits from this article? Well, I think as much the reader as the subject of it, because of course it is nice for the engineers to be rewarded and congratulated, but it's also nice for the reader to have actual examples of what it would mean to be an environmental engineer because it can be quite vague just to know that you're working with the environment, but seeing how people who specialize in that area come to help these big construction projects and in which ways they help can kind of give you a better idea of what the job is and what it means to get into it. In conclusion, I think researching this job was super interesting because not only is it inspiring to see that there's people out there who have made it their life mission to leave the earth better than they found it and make a positive difference on the world, but it's also very interesting to see how there really is something for everyone and it's so easy to mix what you're passionate about with your career and to find the perfect job for each and every one. Thank you for listening.